Well, good morning, everybody. John Eishen with Rochester Area Builders. We'll get started. With that, I'm going to introduce Vanessa Hines, who is the 2020 chair of the Commercial Builders Council, to make the introductions.
Yeah, hey, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our first ever CBC webinar, so bear with us as we kind of work through this. Like John said, my name is Vanessa Hines. I'm the 2020 CBC chair. Today we have a panel discussion about energy with some industry experts. We have Ross Nelson with Harris, Kevin Bright with DMC, Drew Larson with RPU, and Jennifer Kimmin with Minnesota Energy. We have all panelists muted, right, or all attendees muted. So there is a chat window that you can type questions into. I will monitor that and kind of keep tabs and ask those questions as they come up. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to John to start asking some questions.
Well, why don't we go through and we'll have each panelist give a couple a minute introduction of themselves. So Drew, do you want to start? You're the first one on my screen that I see.
Sure. So I am Drew Larson from Rochester Public Utilities. I am an energy and environmental advisor. I work with our large key account customers on energy efficiency with their billing. I assist all commercial customers. I do a lot of education in the green field with EVs, on new building techniques, whatnot. Couple things I guess I wanted to cover because I'm not sure what you guys are going to ask. Our rebate programs, number one. We have a state mandated conservation improvement program that enables RPU and Minnesota Energy Resources to develop rebate programs to help incent for energy saving equipment being installed in both new construction and in retrofit. These are probably going to be changing in the next couple of years. There's legislation that was in front of Congress this year that did not pass, mainly because of COVID. But next year we are looking forward to it passing. So that might change programs a little bit. It's kind of status quo at the moment. Really for next year, not much is going to be changing. We are going to remove our new construction lighting because that's pretty much being done by everybody anyway. But all the other programs with the cooling equipment, with any air compressor units, anything energy saving, we can offer a rebate for if there's a baseline and a proven energy savings. But another thing I wanted to touch on too is COVID's brought up a lot of financing concerns. So there are a lot of financing opportunities with PACE, with Trillion BTU, and other programs that are being offered right now with the state and the federal level that builders and owners can take advantage of. So that's about what I have to say.
All right, thank you. Ross Nelson, you want to give a little blurb about who you are?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ross Nelson. I'm the General Manager of Controls for Harris. And so I oversee controls in St. Paul as well as our Rochester locations, and have more recently begun transitioning that to a local team there in the Rochester market. As a controls provider and as a mechanical systems provider, obviously being mostly what Harris is known for, we live energy conservation. We work in that market every day. And some of the things I hope to bring today is some of the newer areas. You know, we're familiar with things that have been around for a long time around how do we shut things off, how do we reduce airflow rates, how do we reduce ventilation rates. But today, some of the things we're seeing an increasing trend towards are areas like analytics and what we call telemetry, as well as a bridge into greater non-proprietary systems. And then if we have a chance, we'll talk a little bit about some of the early COVID impacts we're seeing that honestly are working against some of the energy conservation things that we're going to be talking about. as we look to increase ventilation rates and some other considerations. But excited about the opportunity to share some of how we conserve energy and how we can partner with organizations like RPU and others to do so.
All right, thank you, Ross. Kevin, take it away.
Sure. My name is Kevin Bright. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Director for the Destination Medical Center in the City of Rochester. Today, what I was going to talk about was a couple of our community serving programs. One's our benchmarking program that we invite and open and offer to anybody in the community to participate. So any business owner that has a building or physical space that has utility bills that are charged against it, this program can help you understand how much you're paying in utilities and is that typical for a building of your size. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that works and some next steps for that program. The second is the City of Rochester and the DMC have some sustainable building guidance. So in order to receive public financing, these design elements need to be integrated into new projects. So I want to take a minute just to review what those are, and we'll probably start to see some overlap between those requirements and the incentives offered by RPU, as well as maybe some of the strategies that Harris offers in their firm as well. And then the last thing I'll touch on is I also manage some energy projects within the city. So we can talk about some of the ways that city buildings have been reducing energy, particularly City Hall. We went through a recommissioning process last year and are seeing about a 30% savings through a lot of controls changes. So a nice interconnection between that project and Harris as well. So looking forward to today.
Thank you. Yeah, so our office, RAB's office, is participating in that benchmarking, and it'll be interesting to see what happens because since we started that process, we switched all the lights from fluorescent to LED in the building, and we got our wonderful rebate from RPU as well. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens if we can get a little closer to that certification. So anyway, Jennifer Kimmen from Minnesota Energy, are you there?
Good morning. I have been unmuted. Yes. So I am Jennifer Kimmen from Minnesota Energy Resources, and I am the service managers on the Conservation Improvement Program. So any sort of rebates that our customers will be working with, I'm the go-to person. Typically, Paul O'Sullivan would be on this call. He is out this morning, but I will take over and see what I can answer here. We'll talk about existing buildings and what we can do for rebates, both prescriptive and turnkey. We'll talk about new construction. We'll also touch on some limited time rebate bonuses that we have that are really important to get in. There's some deadlines on that. We'll also touch on some program changes that will help support what Kevin was talking about, the benchmarking, and then also getting other projects going to help with incentive and rebates that will help with his sustainability journey. And then I'm just here for questions on other areas too. So I will be on and be able to answer as we go.
Thank you for pinch hitting this morning. I appreciate you being here. So, Drew, we're going to circle back to you, and I'm going to share my screen now so people can see the handout that we have. So this would be, let's see here. Can everybody see that, I hope?
I provided a few links, and I'm hoping that you can share this with all the attendees.
Yes,
a lot of the frequently asked questions we get obviously are on the rebates. So it's got the rebates links, rules and regulations links, rate and fees schedule, and for the construction for service applications as well. And then for the city of Rochester, we've got those famous PIF fees that everybody loves, the wastewater PIF fees based on the water meter size, stormwater fees, so links for that. And as far as financial resources go, and I'm not sure if you're going to be touching on this, Kevin, but there are several, not necessarily just local, but statewide and federal level available funding for clean energy projects. And these don't have to be new projects. These can be a retrofit of an existing building. So PACE is actually a program that's run by the Port Authority, St. Paul Port Authority, but is administered by Olmsted County. So this is actually financing that is provided and put onto your tax bill. So it rides along with the property itself. This financing is basically what they want to do is they want to make the payback each year less than the cost, the payment of it less than the cost of what the financing is. So even they can make these over 10 years, they can make them over 20 years. It's a very, very good way to fund a large capital project that you might not have the capital for right now, but the energy savings are there. Trillion BTU works very similarly. However, with that, you can just pay it monthly. That's just like a regular financing program. Both of those programs are run, but like I said, by the St. Paul Port Authority, and they're fairly easy to apply for the PACE. You can go up to the county website, and that'll direct you to everything that you need. Trillion BTU, go to the Port Authority, and you can get in contact with them. And both very easy to set up. Things that you can include is just, simple things like roofing and roof insulation. You can include solar panels for it. You can include, big chillers, things that have a large payback period. And you can do this regardless of whether it qualifies for a rebate or not. But most of these items are actually going to qualify for a rebate as well. And then on the bottom, don't forget about the tax credits. There are a bunch of tax credits right now for commercial buildings. So they have a tax credit for any energy incentives for, what is it? I believe it's above 2007, ASHRAE 2007, if I'm not mistaken. It has to be 50% better than 2007 ASHRAE, and they give a fairly substantial tax credit on that one as well. So just want to provide you guys with a little bit of resources as far as that goes. And if you guys have any questions on anything, we want you to consider RPU as a resource. You can contact me directly. You can contact any of our marketing team. And we can, if we don't know the answer, we will find it out.
Awesome, thank you. Kevin, I'm gonna pull up your slideshow.
As we pull them up, if there's any background noise, it's just a 4- and 6-year-old boy who woke up too early in the background, so I apologize for that. But yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully I can shed some light on this benchmarking and sustainability building requirements. Next slide, please. So yep, that's our agenda. So what is benchmarking? Basically, it aligns with this old adage that it helps you measure your energy use so you can better understand it. And then benchmarking, the actual practice is being able to compare your energy consumption to other like buildings so you can see and get a quick reading to understand if you're consuming too much or too little or kind of just the right amount. And obviously, if you're consuming a little bit too much or maybe just the right amount, there might be some utility incentive programs that you might be able to leverage in your building in order to help reduce your energy consumption further. So the linkage here is with this piece of information, you'll be a lot more informed to say, hey, maybe it's time to invest a few more dollars to replace lights in my building. And if that's what I want to do, maybe I'll go talk to Drew and his team at RPU to figure out what are some good lights, who are some qualified contractors. You all are qualified contractors too, as I'm saying that, but be able to ask him some more questions to figure out how to right size this project, what are the right approach for it, and that kind of thing. Next slide, please. So what is benchmarking? Quite, simply put, it's combining your utility meter information, so the bills you get on a monthly basis from Minnesota Energy Resources as well as RPU, and combining it with some building characteristics. So the size of the building, the type of the building itself, the schedule that it's open, how much is it occupied over the course of the day, and then the number of workers and workstations typically that you have within your facility. So a relatively simple short list of information. They even auto-populate these building characteristic values if you're not sure, or if it's a little bit too much work to collect that, depending on the size of your facility. That information can be input for you or on your behalf. And out of that comes a metric that's kind of like a miles per gallon reading for your building. In this case, it's called energy use intensity, and it's the amount of energy you use per square foot over the course of a year. In some cases, your building may also qualify for an Energy Star score. So office buildings, for instance, schools, hotels, the data set within Energy Star, this program that we'll talk about more in a second, the data set is robust enough that it can create a statistical score for you, anywhere from a 0 to 100. 100 being really good, meaning you're in the 100th percentile of all similar office buildings across the United States, and 0 meaning not so good, where you're in the zero percentile for like office buildings across the United States. And 50 would put you right in the middle. So if you're a 50, you say, well, I'm doing all right, I'm not doing great. It's probably worth looking at some utility programs or some ways to reduce the energy in my building. Next slide, please. Here we go. So yeah, how it works. We in Rochester are asking everybody to just use this free Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool. If you're familiar with the name Energy Star, they do or offer a lot of other programs, like offer labels for appliances that you might see in a home. So there are Energy Star labeled dishwashers and refrigerators, for instance. In this case, you could also have a building that's Energy Star rated, and they offer a program called Portfolio Manager in order to help you do that. So you set up a username and password, you put in your property details, which is the size of your facility, the schedule that it's open, the number of hours, that kind of thing. And then you enter a year's worth or more of energy use data. Here in Rochester, we're asking that people consider inputting 3 years of utility data, and that way you can kind of get a good sense of the trend of energy consumption within a building. Similar to how John started today, he mentioned that he put in some LEDs, and he's excited to see how the energy consumption in his building might have changed. That's exactly what benchmarking is built to do, is to help justify but also inform energy decisions within your facility. And then ultimately you can update it on an annual basis or even on a monthly basis as you get your utility bills in. So you just go in a portfolio manager, say I consumed X number of kilowatt hours and X number of therms. It'll update all your metrics for you until it give you your new score and your new energy use index, which is that EUI metric that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So what does it take to benchmark? Usually in year one, it could take anywhere from 2 to 10 hours. Here we've been kind of trending closer to 2, just because the buildings that we've been working with thus far are pretty simple. It gets a little complicated if it's a bigger building and there's a lot of different things going on inside of it, like classroom space, office space, gymnasiums, gym. Well, I just said gymnasium. You get the idea. And the more space types you have, the more square footages you need to understand. The operating hours may be different across all of those. So it could get complicated, but usually for an office building or a multifamily building, it could take an hour and a half is probably typical. And after that, it's really just kind of maintenance. So your profile is already set up and it's just a matter of updating your utility bill data on a monthly basis in years 2 plus, so future years of the program. So for John this year, I think he had already set up a profile in years past. So last year we just updated some utility data, and the same applies for his building this year. We're just putting in 12 entries for electric consumption and 12 entries for gas consumption, which represents each month of the year that has passed. Next slide, please. So how can it help you save? I guess first and foremost, you're able to benchmark or compare your building to others nationally. So it normalizes your data for weather changes that we all know are distinct to Minnesota that probably aren't experienced in San Francisco or other maybe more temperate areas of the United States. You can prioritize kind of things that might have the greatest potential savings based on your EUI. So projects within your building, or if you have a number of buildings, a portfolio of buildings, you can say which ones are using the most energy. Those are probably the ones I should start with first. That's exactly the process we used at City Hall or the city buildings. We saw City Hall had a particularly high energy use index. We said we probably need to look at some energy projects there to reduce those. This tool is also pretty powerful in that you can develop a baseline. So within the tool, you can say, here's my baseline energy performance. This is what I'd like to get at. This is where I'd like to have my utility bills be on a monthly basis. How much of a reduction would I need to do in order to get there? And what are some specific actions that I should take or things that I should evaluate, like projects that I should implement in order to get there? Then finally, there is a program that you can earn Energy Star certification for your building. There's not too many in the city of Rochester. Rochester Area Builders was certified, I think, a few years ago, and now they're working their way back to that. And there's a couple others at Mayo that are eligible, but very few certified. So this is a way that you could distinguish your business from a performance standpoint. And then, like Jennifer was mentioning, Minnesota Energy Resources offers some incentive, some bonus incentive dollars for buildings that are participating. Next slide, please. I want to make sure I'm being mindful of other people's time too. I'll hurry this up. Next slide. I'm sorry. My computer might be slow. There we go.
Yeah.
So here, just in general, just by a matter of benchmarking your building, so just under, thanks, Jeff. Just by a matter of benchmarking your building, you can start saving energy and understanding just by looking at utility bills on a somewhat annual basis. Start realizing savings by being more aware of the energy you are consuming within your facility. Next slide, please. So in this case, we're seeing that there's a 7% savings just by a matter of paying attention to your utility bills, which sounds like a lot, but paying attention matters. So that's what we're seeing. Also, there's value added to your building as a result of participating in benchmarking. So in terms of rental prices that facilities are gaining in the market, sales prices after they're exchanging ownership, or the occupancy rates are all higher. Number of rebuilding studies all around the year 2010. But basically, by paying attention to utility bills, you're operating a more efficient building, and that's recognized in the market as well. Next slide, please. Sorry, if my connection's a little slow. There we go. And then finally, we also see that there's a lot of activity in the market as a result of benchmarking. So this is done in a survey in New York City as part of their benchmarking ordinance. 3/4 of the people made operational changes in their building, and also 3/4 invested in new equipment as a result of developing a better understanding of how their buildings were consuming energy. So really, this is just good information to make better decisions. That's the core of the benchmarking program itself. Next slide, please. So how we can help. So here in Rochester, we're offering free technical guidance every year. If folks are interested after this webinar today, we can help set them up with a profile at no cost to the business. We just think it's an important thing for folks to be able to understand how to benchmark, get it set up correctly, and then continue to use it over time to make good, sound efficiency decisions for their facility. So how this work is just email me. We'll set up a time to meet with you, get the data that we need in terms of the utility bills and the building characteristics. We'll work you to set up a profile and then review a time, find a time to review the results with you. And like I said, Jennifer will talk about the Minnesota Energy Resources kind of enhanced incentive. And from this, you can compare your building to entities and buildings across the country in order to help just make better business decisions. Next slide, please. So from there, I was going to change gears, talk a little bit about our sustainability elements as it's tied to the new construction program. So with the DMC and in the tax increment financing policy of the city, there are some sustainable design elements that have been integrated into that. And basically they kind of run the gamut of resource reduction for a facility, with first and foremost focusing on energy. And there's a target of reducing energy in the facility by 20% compared to code. So we're using ASHRAE 90.1 2010 as the baseline, because that's Minnesota Energy Code, and asking for buildings that are applying for funding to show us that they're able to demonstrate a 20% reduction below energy code. On top of that, we're asking for tracking to demonstrate a 75% waste diversion rate as part of the construction practice. So there's a bunch of buildings that have done this in downtown already. I don't know if you walk by the Indigo Hotel, but they had a really kind of Class A example of how to increase diversion rates on a construction site, where they had dumpsters that had source separated materials. So aluminum and metals were in one, wood was in another, gypsum board at the time of that construction period was in another bin, and then general waste. And through the course of the projects, they asked the subcontractors to sort the material that way, and they had a really high construction waste diversion rate as a result of that process, and that's something we'd want to see more of here in Rochester. The next two have to deal with water, so the amount of water that you're reducing within your facility, and then the amount of irrigation that you're needing on site. Ideally, for our buildings, we're designing things that don't even require irrigation, because we're using native plant species and things that can adapt to drought or anything they may experience here in Minnesota. But 50% irrigation reduction is kind of the first threshold for receiving funding. There's some mention of alternative transportation elements like EV charging readiness within facilities. So a good tie to our utility here in RPU, but asking that the actual electrical conduit is provided on site, so that in the future electric vehicle chargers can be installed without incurring additional electrical costs. There's some mention of third-party certification for DMC funds. It's required for the city TIF policy. It's not required to pursue third-party certification, but some documentation ensure that the goals that are mentioned above are actually being met. And then we do ask that you participate in the benchmarking program that I just talked about as part of receiving funding from the city or DMC. So that way we can start to understand, how is this building performing over time? It's one thing to build an efficient building, but it's an entirely separate effort to make sure that it's operated that way. So the benchmarking program helps ensure that's happening. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, and happy to answer any questions that come up too. So thanks for having me.
John, are you still there?
Did we lose John?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we did. It shows that he's still there. John?
I don't know, should Roscoe or the?
I can jump in. All right, I'll go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
So thank you to Drew and Kevin, in that both of the things that they mentioned, or the main topics that they've addressed there, are exactly what I would encourage anybody to do. To start with benchmarking, start with understanding where you are. And since every bill you send in and every bill you pay includes that rider for the CIP program, to capitalize on those funds, to go after and address the things that you can in your building. What we do at Harris, in addition to that, one part we've done for a long time is to take measurements and take air quality readings and measure the indoor air quality of our spaces. And if we are proactively measuring those indoor air quality conditions, then we are taking the benchmarking data and also adding on to it the ability to know, are we over-ventilating? Are we under-ventilating? How are we managing our overall both cost as well as the indoor air quality for our occupants? And so we have done for a long time, in addition to the benchmarking that we're talking about, where we look at the Energy Star scores, we have also taken and put instrumentation into buildings to measure those conditions and provide a snapshot in time that says, under normal conditions, here's the different contaminants that are in the air, here's your CO2 level, and then from that, being able to start correlating it back to, how is your ventilation rate? Are you on track? Are you off track? Or are there areas that you can make improvements? And so we've done that for a long time as part of our regular performance assessments that we do with buildings. What we've been doing more recently, in addition to that, is pairing it with essentially ongoing continuous monitoring and commissioning and recommissioning of those same pieces of equipment. And so we put that in a box. We essentially call it telemetry, and it is performance-based commissioning, where we, in the controls world for many, many years, for essentially the last 20 years, have been collecting lots and lots and lots of information. And then we put it on a server somewhere and we don't look at it, and we may go back to it if we had something that happened to pop up as an issue. But generally in our industry, we've been really good at collecting information and really poor at sorting through that information and providing actionable insights or actionable information that you can capitalize on. And so with telemetry and with the activities that we're doing today, and what we see certainly growing into the future, is taking real-time readings, real-time monitoring, taking all of these trended points that the building automation, the controls world has been really good at collecting for a long period of time, and mining that data. And so we have data scientists on our team that are literally, their job is to sort through lots and lots of trended information and create rules that will assess the performance of the building and identify issues early. And by identifying those issues early, of course, we will provide lower energy costs, which is of course one of the main drivers of it, is to improve the cost performance of the utilities within the building. But we also will provide greater building comfort in that we will know earlier if there's a problem. And so a key story of that is we have had projects where we have had chillers go down in buildings, and we have had technicians dispatched to the site to address the issue. And we'll call the building manager, and we'll say, we need to get access, the chiller's down, we need to get this taken care of. And they'll say, what do you mean, everything's fine? And then once we get in and show them, they see that you're right. We didn't know because we hadn't gotten the complaints yet. We hadn't seen it on the back end where we've had somebody be uncomfortable, but instead we're able to address it early on. And so that greater building comfort also allows you to watch for the drift, the inherent drift of pieces that ultimately wear out. That could be bearings that are failing. That could be a damper actuator that's not closing or opening fully anymore. And so these small things can end up being essentially leeches that suck energy out of the building. And so I encourage telemetry to help with that. What it also does is take visible information that, as I've said in the past, we store it on servers, essentially, eventually we delete it, and instead bring it into a place where you now know. And we provide an ongoing score for your building that can show a trend over time of the improved performance within that facility. I did mention a little bit earlier where COVID is having an impact here as well. And so we've been working with a lot of customers to get ready and to be positioning their spaces for people coming back and essentially repopulating the buildings that they manage. And one of the challenges out of that is one of the first things that people are doing is, of course, improving their filtration, as well as improving and potentially adding some UV lights and some other criteria or considerations with their equipment. They're also looking at increasing their ventilation. And increasing ventilation and the number of times you're turning over the air within your facility is a key part of people feeling more safe in this COVID environment that we're living in today. Now, of course, that works against your energy conservation. And so one of those areas that we've worked with customers on is how do we tailor that exactly for what you need? Because more works great up to a point until your equipment can't keep up, or until your space becomes really uncomfortable, or in about 6 months until you freeze up all the pipes within your building and have a really expensive repair to deal with. And so we are working with customers on that as well, of trying to take and help them navigate through this new world with COVID. And how do we still be efficient? How do we still be wise in the things we're pursuing? But how do we do so to help include safety now as a greater concern? And so those are a few of the things. One thing I did want to mention as well, Drew brought up tax credits, and there are some very specific tax credits right now around the areas of depreciation of certain purchases that do trigger or can have impacts for energy conservation. And there's so I'm not a tax I am not a tax attorney, and so by no means am I encouraging that you qualify, but it is worth looking at if some of the purchases that you've made would help. And generally they need to be outside of the building, so some of the equipment like rooftops and so forth would qualify. And so I would encourage you, if you have something that you've done, either are looking at for the future or have done in the last, I think it's 2 tax years, to assess that and talk with your tax advisor, because there may be credits that you could actually go backwards for over the past couple of years as well. And those primarily are driven around some of those equipment type purchases. Let me see if I had anything else on my notes that I wanted to make sure I covered. Ultimately, information is power. And so in what we do, we want to take the information you have and create it to be actionable. I also like to tell a story when we talk about rebates and we talk about benchmarking, in that I had a customer, it happened to be a school district, and they had a janitor that opened a valve, a domestic water valve, and they ended up spending $50,000 more in water in 1 month than they normally did. Essentially ran water right down a drain. And so one of the parts that always comes back to that is having the information and entering it in Energy Star is great. Sometimes you can find out about a problem just a little bit too late, because if you had found out about that on day one, you would have saved essentially, almost $40-some thousand by simply knowing it early. And with many utilities, you can connect in information into an automation system, and it's relatively cheap to do. To be perfectly honest, of all the things that you may do, connecting that in, having trend information on it, and being able to measure it in real time can provide just that added bit of value that helps you be more proactive and see that problem earlier on. And so that is one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned as well.
All right, let's see if I'm back.
You're back, John.
Hey, gotta love when technology glitches, but you know what? That's why we have awesome chairs like Vanessa to take over when I go wandering. So Jennifer, Minnesota Energy Resources. Let's see if we can get
Yes,
you.
I am here. So I will try to keep this short and sweet. I will just touch a little bit on our current commercial SIP programs. We, for existing buildings, we have prescriptive and custom rebates. That's like your boiler upgrades, any kind of maybe repair, replacing steam traps, any work you might do on insulation. We also have turnkey, which is our engineering studies and technical support. So any kind of turnkey help you need, this is the resources, we would provide the resources needed to get energy savings projects implemented. We have a custom report with no cost or low cost and high value savings opportunities around that. Our multifamily direct install plus, our multifamily program is pretty bulky. Any buildings with 5 or more residential units that use natural gas for space and water heating, they also come in with that custom report with no cost or low cost and savings opportunities. They will come in and install high efficiency shower heads, faucet aerators, pipe insulation. They will assess the heating systems such as boiler adjustments. We also have new construction, which would be home energy excellence for builders. We can go into that if folks have questions. There's design assistance and modeling opportunities. And then of course we also have limited time bonuses right now. 2 big ones are the insulation rebate. There's an extra 10 cents per square foot. Our standard rebate is 20 to 30 cents per square foot, and right now is 30 to 40 cents. That offer does end December 11th of 2020. There is no special application or form required. And then we also have a limited time bonus on our steam traps. That is an additional 25%. And so for those folks that are involved in the benchmarking program, the benchmarking bonus is an additional 25% rebate, and you cannot stack those rebates. But if you are part of that benchmarking program, you'd be part of that extra 25%. That also has application required on it, and December 11th, 2020 is the deadline for that. We do have a couple proposed program changes for 2021. that benchmarking support rebate, 25% bonus rebate within 9 months for submitting benchmarking results. So again, as you work with Kevin Bright on that, and we work on rebates for that Energy Star certification, we can help with that support. Also for 2021 redesign, the Energy Design Assistance and Modeling is going to kind of change their approach, more of a custom approach, and it will all be based on exceeding building code baseline. And then, so for commercial rebates, measures will be added, such as modulating clothes dryers, grain dryers. There's cooling and freezing doors that will be added to that, pipe insulation, and an Energy Star griddle. So, also multifamily, there's a market rate is 25% bonus rebate within 9 months of site visit evaluation with direct install. And for low income multifamily, there's a 50% bonus rebate above standard rebate offerings. So I know that's a lot of information. We can put together maybe a small follow-up. I know Drew is going to send out a follow-up after this, so maybe we'll follow that same. We'll follow your lead, Drew, and get that out there so if folks have questions. It's one click away. And I think that's it on our side.
Awesome, thank you. I've included the handouts. I don't know how you get them because I'm not that smart, but I did find how to drag and drop. So I have Drew's information and the slideshow from Kevin in there. But we will be sharing this webinar on our YouTube page. Yep, we have a YouTube page, which is kind of fun. I don't see any questions popping up. Vanessa, any closing comments from you? If you're still there.
Yep, sorry, I keep muting myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't see any comments coming through either. I just want to thank you all for your time. It's really a great conversation. If anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for participating. Appreciate you taking time out of the day, and I didn't hear the boys once, so they must have been on their best behavior, Kevin.
A blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.